Thank you all for joining us today. We'll be going through our webinar on your roadmap to the EU and UK cosmetic compliance, understanding regulation EC number 1223-2009. We've got two lovely guest speakers today, and throughout this webinar, you can feel free to write any questions in the Q&A box with the question mark, not the chat section, and we've saved time at the end to answer them. We'll also follow up with a link to the recording so you can refer back to it anytime. So let's get started. I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker today, Jacqueline Belomo, a cosmetics expert consultant. She is a seasoned, respected key figure in the cosmetics industry. Jacqueline will guide you through our review of regulatory guidelines to get your products safely and securely into the EU and UK markets. Our second speaker, Carl Atkinson, who is based in the UK, is the operations lead for the personal care regulatory business line for registrar in the EU and UK markets. Carl has over a decade of experience in project management and operations management across diverse areas, including engineering and cosmetics. Personal care regulatory became part of the Registrar Corp business in December 2024. Personal Care Regulatory, also known as PCR Group, is a leading cosmetic regulatory, toxicology, and compliance company based in the UK and Ireland. PCR has helped businesses ensure safety, sustainability, and compliance with industry regulations through their expert toxicologists and regulatory specialists, supporting product development and global expansions for cosmetics. With our expanded capabilities together, we can provide seamless end-to-end compliance services across the UK, EU, and US. We're happy to have both Carl and Jacqueline join us to share their expertise. Jacqueline will discuss the regulations overview, and Carl will close on how we can help you get your products into the EU and UK markets. I'll pass the presentation over to Jacqueline.
Thank you so much, Anne, and thank you everyone for joining us today. It is a very exciting topic, probably one of my favorites. So I'm just going to go over the agenda. We're going to do an overview of the EU regulation. We're also going to talk about 5 key steps to get your cosmetics into the EU and UK markets. And then we're going to go into a little bit more detail and discuss the compliance requirements needed to get your products into those markets, such as GMPs, product safety testing requirements, PIFs, the difference between the EU and UK systems, and then understanding, of course, the responsibilities of the responsible person. We will also discuss the consequences of non-compliance. It's very important to understand when you don't follow these regulations and these processes, what could potentially happen to your products and to your brand. So we want to start off by understanding what is a cosmetic product, right? And how is it regulated? So cosmetic products are substances or mixtures of substances intended to be placed in contact with the external parts of the human body, right? So your skin, your hair, your nails, your teeth, in some cases. Examples of this include makeup foundations, perfumes, hair colorants, lotions, shampoos. We all use cosmetics. We all use personal care items. That is what a cosmetic is. But how is it regulated? So the European Union is regulating cosmetics into the EU markets, right? So they built a regulatory framework for market access. And this also includes international trade relations and then regulatory partners, right? So local authorities, they have their own regulatory partners, and understanding how all of these local authorities work together to have a framework for regulatory compliance for cosmetics. They aim to ensure the highest level of consumer safety while promoting the innovation and the competitiveness of the cosmetic sector. So it's very important to understand that the European Union isn't there to, go against anyone who's trying to do innovation. They are there to protect consumer safety. And they work with cosmetic stakeholders at EU and international levels to exchange information and ensure a smoother implementation of EU requirements in the cosmetic sector. As many of us might know, there are many countries that adopt the ways of the EU regulations in terms of restricted ingredients, even safety data, how everything is viewed, because it has such a great framework to understanding the overall safety of a product and the information needed to gather in order to assess it properly. So overview of the regulation, what does it mean? So went into force July 11th, 2023. This regulation was signed in though in 2009 and replaced the existing EC Cosmetics Directive. This regulation establishes a comprehensive framework to ensure that all cosmetic products marketed in the EU are safe for human health. The cosmetic seller must be in compliance with these standards in order to sell their products within the EU. These rules actually help harmonize the community and achieve an internal market for cosmetic products. Think about how many countries are in the EU and how this one system has adopted it so that you can go through these steps, through this process, and be able to be compliant. Now, that also being said, local authorities have some additional regulations and certain compliance factors in, but this regulation helps make sure that you achieve the most standard way of submitting a product into the market with the proper safety measures in place. It imposes clear and detailed rules, which do not give room for diverging, right? So everyone has to follow these. They could add additional ones, but these are the ones they have to follow. And then ensuring that legal requirements are implemented at the same time throughout the European Union. A lot of what we are seeing in the US right now in cosmetics, right, is MOCRA has passed, MOCRA has went into effect, and each individual state now is enforcing their own individual regulations, right? But before MOCRA, there was no streamlined process, right, that covers all of cosmetic products entering the United States. So this is to make sure, that all of the countries within the EU adopt these regulations at the same time. I always want to start with GMPs because anyone going into the EU or UK needs to understand where you manufacture your cosmetic products is the very first step. We will talk about paperwork, we'll talk about safety assessments, we'll talk about all of that. But the most important piece to understand is that your products need to be made at an EU GMP standard facility. So good GMP, good manufacturing practices. ISO 22716 is the international standard used as GMP guidance in the EU and UK for the production, control, storage, and shipment of cosmetic products. It covers all quality aspects of the product, and this means to cleaning validations and training and audits and even your premises, right? How clean it is and sanitized, how the workers are trained to do certain abilities throughout the making of the cosmetic products. Products must be GMP compliant prior to going to market. And the manufacturing facility is responsible for being in compliance with the ISO 22716 standard, and the responsible person in the EU and UK must make sure that that facility follows those procedures. ISO 22716 audits are done every 3 years with a surveillance audit every year. So it's very much about making sure a facility is maintaining their GMP protocols, that they are adhering to the quality standards. We all know how important manufacturing, filling, storing, and shipping cosmetic products is, and the huge part it plays on the overall safety of the product, right? So, and this goes into that assessment of safety, being at a GMP compliant facility. So always, ask your manufacturers, especially if you are going into the EU and UK, their GMP compliance, their current ISO, certificate, because this is your start, right? This is where you gain your first step into the market. Now we've made our cosmetic, we have our information. So let's go through some key steps to complying with the regulation. We're first going to talk about the cosmetic product safety report. We're going to be talking about labels, the PIF, notifications, and then the responsible person. So what is a CPSR? Everyone talks about the CPSR, and it is a cosmetic product safety report. And it is really a huge part of the overall understanding of the safety of the cosmetic product. It is an independent evaluation on the assessment of the product, and this plays into so many pieces of the type of product it is, where it's used, dosage levels, raw material, tox reports. I mean, it is a huge view of the product. That safety assessment, it is a legal requirement for all products that are sold in the UK and the EU under this directive. It has to be in place prior to going to market, and it determines if the product is safe under reasonable, foreseeable conditions. One key factor to mention is that not everyone can do a CPSR. It must be completed by a qualified safety assessor with credentials available within the final report. So anyone doing a CPSR and does the evaluation, signs the report, also has to put their credentials in to show that they're qualified to determine the overall safety of the product. So very, very important to understand that regulatory people without a safety assessment background or certificate really need to have the support of toxicologists and safety assessors in order to complete this piece of the regulation. Now, the CPSR is broken down into two separate parts, Part A, which is the cosmetic product safety information, and Part B, which is the overall safety assessment. This Part A section gathers and organizes all the available data on the products, such as the toxicological profile of the ingredients, formulation, testing, exposure information, right? This is where you do your margin of safeties. This is where you do your dermal absorptions, right? You need a qualified toxicologist to review the ingredients. A lot of companies like PCR, we build toxicological profiles, right, in order to make sure that we have all available information on these ingredients to give the safety assessment needed for that overall product with the ingredients at those levels used. It consists of a compilation of analysis of that data from the PIF to ensure the product safety. Part B is the conclusion, right? And this is the product safety on the analysis conducted in Part A. So think Part A is all of your investigation, your evaluation, your reporting, and then this is the conclusion. It is the final safety assessment report, and it will include any warnings, usage conditions, or other limitations that should be considered when marketing the product, right? So if you do a toxicological review and the product is used in the eye area, and the dosage is at a certain level, right? So is there a warning needed, right? Is there a condition that it shouldn't be used with a warning, right? And this is where that conclusion comes into play, where the product would then need to have that information available to the consumers to make sure the consumer is safe when using that product. The label now is a crucial part of making sure that you are compliant, right? And I say this because most people with labels, right, we all try to have a globally compliant label. So we all try to get as much information on the label as possible. But it's very important because this is your first visible entry into the EU, especially if you're shipping outside of the EU, from US to EU or from Canada to EU, right? Even within the EU, shipping through, transport, your label is the first visibility, right, to customs, to authorities, and it is mandatory to have these requirements on your cosmetic label when selling in the EU and the UK. First and foremost, the responsible person. We will get into much detail, but this is the name and address of the responsible person who ensures the product's compliance with the regulation. And that is really key because that person needs to be based in the EU and the UK, right? And that address will be where authorities will be able to contact and ask for information if needed. So has to be on the label. Has to be visible on the label and has to know the authorities have to know where to go to, right? Um, Precautions of use, right? So we just talked about warning statements, special precautions. This needs to be on there. There are certain products sold in the EU that automatically come with warnings, right? So think of your AHAs, your BHAs, right? Avoiding contact with the eyes, anything of that nature that deems itself a precaution or a warning should also be visible and translated in local languages as well. Um, it also must state the product's weight and volume. Net weight is so important. It has to be in the correct units of measurement. Has to make sure that it's visible. Has to be make sure it's both on primary and secondary. So very, very important detail. Batch number also, this is the reference for identifying the product. So your manufacturing facility, which will be GMP compliant, will need to put that batch number, right? And this is the traceability that goes back into the product if there is an issue, if there is a problem, if there is several adverse events, right? That batch number will be able to be tracked to a batch that was made back at your facility. Date of minimum durability. What does that mean? We all know expiration dates, shelf lives, PAOs. So in Europe, anything that holds a shelf life below 30 months will need to have an expiration date on it. And that's really important because that determines if you have a PAO versus an hourglass symbol. When you have that hourglass symbol, you will also need to have an expiration date, which needs to get printed on each batch that's made because expiration dates go by batch manufacturing. So really, really important to understand the durability of your product and its shelf life and what that means, because that could add a potentially extra step in your manufacturing process, an extra step in your operations to be able to keep track of your products with the expiration date, shorter shelf life, going into the EU and UK. And I say that because it's important that the consumer is safe. So if the product is not good after a certain date, the potential of something going wrong with the consumer kind of heightens, right? And PAO, right? Period after opening. This goes also by your stability, your compatibility, and understanding the overall durability of the product. Product function. This is so crucial. It is what the product does. There should be no question at all what the product does. Is it a lipstick? Is it a mascara? Is it, foundation? And that has to also be translated into the local authorities language where you're selling your product as well. Ingredient list, I think we're all familiar with. I think this is universal across the board. Descending order by weight, colors appropriately identified, fragrances listed to the regulation, and of course, allergens in any, not only fragrances, but in any raw materials as well. EU just expanded their fragrance list. Everyone is in the process of updating their fragrance list with the allergens. So very important to understand that as well. And then, of course, directions of use of how to use the product, amount of use, frequency of use. And again, these are very typically found on current cosmetic products, but it's also important to understand if there are certain things you're missing that you might not have on your packaging to potentially look into. Now the big one, right? So how does this all come together? Where does all this information come from? And that is a PIF creation, a product information file. This is a file of all documents related to the product that companies must retain, and it must be easily accessible location to provide to local authorities if requested and needed. It has to be fully compliant with the provisions set out in the regulations. It should be kept for a period of 10 years. You can see on the side, there's a lot of information to gather. Every raw material, you need to have your MSDS, your DS, your C of A. Additionally, some raw materials need more information. They need purity statements, allergen statements, origin statements. There is a lot of information to gather. And then at a formula level, right, you need all your finished formula information, your stability, your compatibility, your micro. And then again, your artwork images, your label, and this is all compiled, right? And this is what they use to understand this overall safety of the product. The CPSR is a part of this PIF as well, but all the information that you gather from your PIFs, your raw material, your final formulation is what helps create that CPSR. And it sounds like all these things are happening at the same time, and that is exactly what's happening. You're collecting information, you're providing information, and you're also creating a overall product information file to hold all the information, right? That CPSR is your determination of safety, and you need to have all of that backup and information in order to create what you have provided as a safe product. The responsible person has to make the PIF. It has to be readily accessible in electronic or other format, available at one single address within the EU. Location and access to the PIF should also be on the label, as we spoke about before, and available in the language which can easily be understood by local authorities as well. So really, really key here, and I hope everyone has been listening, how important the responsible person is. The responsible person is taking on all of this responsibility. And I say that because if there is an issue or if there is a discrepancy, that is where the local authorities will go to. They will go to that responsible person. And it goes into a lot of how you work with your responsible person, how you can trust them. And we will get into that so much in a few slides. But the next step we want to talk about is notifications, right? So I have all of this information. I have gathered all this information. I've done my safety assessment. It's really important to understand that there are two separate portals. So there is a portal for EU and there is a portal for UK. They operate similar, but you need to do both, and you receive two different notification numbers. So starting with EU is the CPMP portal, so the Cosmetic Products Notification Portal. You need to submit your formulation and your label prior to going to market. EU notifications are based on formula, so again, formulas can be grouped together if it's the same product but different shades. So you have a lipstick with 10 shades, or if you have the same product, a different size, they can be grouped together. You need to notify local authorities of new products on the market. You need to remove notifications for old products that are no longer on the market. You do not need to renew your notifications every year, but if you do have a formula or artwork date, you need to update your existing notification. If you switch your manufacturer, you need to update your information as well. So if you do tech transfers or if you have dual sources, things of that nature, you need to be aware do require an update to the existing notification. Very similar, UK, right? The UK portal is the SCPN, so the Submit Cosmetic Product Notification prior to going to market. UK notifications are based on artwork, so products may be grouped by formula submission to each portal. Same products, different colors, different sizes, same overall process, much like understanding, again, the difference between the two different portals and then needing them both to be notified. The local authority has to know when a new product is going to market. You have to remove older products. And then again, you do need a new notification different than the EU when you update your formula and your artwork. So very, very important to understand the differences between the two different notifications and needing them both. I remember when this all first came out many, many years ago, everyone thought it was just one, and it might have been one at the time, but as, the UK and the EU have had their slight separations, there are two different portals, and we have to be knowledgeable to know how to operate both of those, right? And then knowing, of course, the difference between them. Now, we've been saying responsible person for the last 30 minutes or so, and you're probably all like, get to the responsible person, because this person is basically the key holder, right? It's the person that holds the PIFs, creates the PIFs, gets the CPSR done with the safety assessor. And that responsible person has a very important job, right? And we want to go into those details. So there is a separate RP that is required for both the UK and EU. It's very important that you work with a responsible person that has locations in both. PCR, of course, we do. It also has to be an established entity legally responsible for ensuring a cosmetic product complies with cosmetic regulations. It can be a manufacturer or the brand owner if located in the EU or the UK, if they have a physical address. Remember, because if needed, it needs to be at a physical address. If not, they can designate an authorized representative. That authorized representative is the one that has their name and address on the product label. So you'll have your brand, you'll have your name everywhere, you'll have all your information, and then you'll have your RP, right, for EU and UK that will also go onto your label. And when you think about label and you think about label updates, it's a very important choice to pick someone that you trust, right? Because this person is going to be your representative, your authorized representative in the EU and the UK. Some key responsibilities, again, the technical documentation, the labels and instructions use, manufacturer details, being able to cooperate with authorities upon request. So a lot of time, the European Union, if they see an issue with a certain product throughout the different local authorities, they will reach out to authorized representatives, and they'll reach out to responsible persons, asking information about if they have these products also under their responsibility. They also can provide market surveillance with necessary documentation to demonstrate a product safety upon request. Again, they are taking in all of the adverse events on your behalf. They are taking in the responsibility, and that is exactly what they're supposed to be doing, right? Their information is on your label. They're taking in that information. They also need to notify the manufacturer if they suspect a product is dangerous as well. There has been cases where we've seen products not be safe, or we think they're safe, and once they hit market, they're not so safe, right? So that is also a responsibility on their behalf. And then inform national authorities about actions taken to address product risks as well. We were saying in the European Union and building this regulatory framework, the responsible persons have a huge say, and are taken seriously about the information they have seen, right, for cosmetic products. And they work with the European Union building out these frameworks that will make sense, right? We all, similar to how we're seeing it happen in the US right now, where they're taking in account, right, all of the countries, other countries, international trade associations, and of course the authorized representatives responsible person to take all this information in. And I think that is what's really important here, is that they have a very, very wide view of the products that are coming in, being assessed for safety, and then being released into the markets. And that is how they're able to do this job so well, right? You will probably hear a seasoned, responsible person or a safety assessor say, as soon as they see a product, they know, right? As soon as they see a material, a raw ingredient, a raw material or an ingredient, there's certain things that and you become accustomed to being able to do that quickly and fast, right? Without having to do the deep research. And it's so important to understand that when you're working with your responsible person, how much experience they have and the backgrounds that the team has as well. So really, really important to put that home, that your responsible person that you're choosing is really important to your overall success in the EU and UK market. And why I say success, because if you do not do your EU UK compliance per the regulation, there could be some costly consequences of non-compliance. A local authority upon import, kind of what I was talking about before, right? So if you're shipping into France versus shipping into Italy, you are hitting a lot of different local authorities. You're hitting a lot of different ports, right? So you have a heightened difference or a heightened exposure when you're not in compliance. And failure to have a valid safety assessment, compliant labels, notification of your products, and maintaining a product information file, I mean, it just will lead you down a path that is filled with issues. So, for instance, detentions, right? So, upon import and your label is non compliant, they could detain your product. They could also hold your product. If they feel that there is an issue with your label, or if they feel that you have not completed the notification properly. And hold with customs, if any of you have been through it, like I have, it is very difficult to get anything out if there is a problem, right? The product's already there, the label's already on it. It's very, very hard to move past something of a non-compliant label at port entry, right? So, and again, there have been instances where you're able to relabel at port entry, but it is very costly. It puts your company on alert. It puts a lot of situations harder than you need. So again, being able to have a compliant label, notifying your product correctly is really, really key here. It could really damage your brand and reputation as well. We've heard so many stories throughout the EU and the UK of brands moving throughout the EU without the proper labels, without the proper notifications, and it's not unseen, right, by local authorities, what is going on in the cosmetic world, right? We would like to think that we're not as important or as serious as some other, categories or industries, but we are, right? We expose ourselves to so many more demographics and so many more people than a lot of other industries, which is why it's so important to keep the safety of those products under control, under regulation, and have legal responsibility to these products as well. Fines, again, it's just a costly consequence of noncompliance. And then worst of it of all is a recall. And I say that because getting pieces back and getting your reputation back and understanding how detrimental recall is to a brand, especially if you're working within distributors or importers or retailers, it is really hard to fix that type of detriment and situational ship, I want to say, when it happens. So again, very important to work with your responsible person on all the information, right? And giving that transparency to make sure that they have everything they need to make sure that your product is safe for use throughout the EU and the UK. Anne, would you like to join us back on?
Thank you, Jacqueline. That was a lot of really wonderful information. Thank you for sharing that. Regulation EC 1223/2009 contains extensive and detailed safety requirements, so it's completely understandable to feel a bit overwhelmed. So to ensure full compliance and peace of mind, consider partnering with a regulatory expert. So Registrar Corp is a highly experienced regulatory partner with over 20 years of experience, having supported over 30,000 clients and conducted label reviews for more than 13,000 products. We aid clients in over 175 countries with 20 regional worldwide offices. We have a superb customer satisfaction rating with 4.8 out of 5 from the online review platform Trustpilot. Specifically for the EU market, we have equally impressive statistics, having created over 5,000 consumer product safety reports. Those are those very detailed safety documents that Jacqueline talked about. And we are the responsible person as PCR for 1,000 plus products. I'll let Carl tell you more about how we can help you in the EU and UK cosmetics markets.
Thanks, Anne. So you've gone through a real deep dive into the regulations, and for a lot of people now, you're probably thinking, oh, this might be a little too difficult. It might be confusing. It might be a bit overwhelming for me. Well, here at PCR and Registrar combined, we've got over 13 years experience helping companies become compliant in the EU and UK market, working with hundreds of clients to make compliance easy. Now, what I'm going to talk you through a little bit is kind of what you need, what the process is, and when you can get in touch and start the ball rolling. As far as when, as early as formula confirmation. As soon as that's confirmed, you can get in touch and we can start this process to get the ball rolling nice and easy. Now, depending on where you're at, you might be brand new to the UK and EU market, or it might be an area that you're already in and you want to know if you're compliant, or you want to move RPs, or just have a general kind of review of where you're at. Starting off, if you are new to the market or you've got MPD on the go, new products, we have a really easy to follow essentials compliance package. It's broken down on screen. Starts off with the CPSR. Now, the main point of this item is to make sure that your product is safe under reasonable and foreseeable conditions. So our in-house UKRT, ERT, and DABT toxicologists will go through all your product documentation, formula, ingredients documents, fragrance, essential oils, testing, packaging, GMP, and provide you with a safety report, which allows you to then confirm not only the product's safe, but also a lot of the information that goes onto the artwork, such as warnings, your ingredients list, and also your PA. When we're doing the artwork reviews, we make sure that all your information on the labels is correct for both articles 19 and 20. 19 being the consumer information that we went through earlier on the call, addresses, in keys warning, origins, nominal content, all that fun. And Article 20 is all based around claims. So that's any copy claims you make on pack, moisturizing, anything like that. Also any logos that you have on pack as well. So the team here will go through that information, provide you feedback. You need to change this, give you options to reword things, or say, look, you've claimed this, you might need this further substantiation, whether it's clinical trials, raw material marketing documents, etc. We then compile all that information and we create your PIF. And we notify the products on either the UK and EU notification portals, providing you with a CPMP or SCMP code or both, add that in the PIF, and then we're good to go. Nice and simple, nice and easy for anyone entering the market. So our next stage is PIF due diligence or PIF gap analysis. Great. So this is for any of you who are already selling in the EU or the UK markets, whether you're selling in one and wanting to move to the other, or you're wanting to change RP, or you just want some better awareness of really what state your PIF is in. You might have had all the compliance done a significant time ago. There's always changes with the regulation. It's ever evolving. So we can go through this and basically analyze and understand anything needs updating or changing, or just to confirm that you've got everything you need. As part of this, we cover the whole PIF. So that's making sure the labeling is all compliant with Articles 19 and 20. All the substantiation and certification is there for your claims and logos. The ingredients list and warning are compliant in line with your CPSR, making sure that the IFRA is compliant, especially with the changes recently with IFRA 51st version and the big increase in allergen list. This is something that's really important for a lot of people we work with at the moment. Making sure there's GMP that's present and pulling all that together in a nice, easy, simple to read report with a RAG analysis. Once that's all done, we can go through and notify the products. And the key thing, which obviously has been the theme throughout this presentation, is about responsible person. So PCR acts as a responsible person in both the UK and the EU. So we can do both for you. So you're only dealing with one person. The RP is the legal representative of the brand within the UK and the EU. And the key thing is it's not about just making sure that your products are compliant for launch, but also that they could remain compliant the entire time that the product's on sale. When the regulations update, and they evolve as naturally they do, it's really important to make sure that stays up to date. So that's the first process that we do. We act as the point of contact with all the regulatory authorities. So in case there's any inspection, your products get taken aside in customs, tested, we can do that liaison with them to make sure that it's keeping you free to do what you do best, also making sure that we're giving accurate representation and communication quickly to remove any obstacles or blockers there are in the way. As part of the process, we sign a mandate. That can be with either yourself, if you're acting solely as the brand, importer and distributor, or it can be with other parties too. This identifies the responsibility of each party to make sure it's clearly covered and everyone knows where they stand on all the different articles within the regulation. Now, as part of this, we do an annual review. So once a year, we go through the products, we have a look at what's changing in the regulation, if there's any changes that are anticipated to affect your products, if there's any GMP certificates that have gone out of date, we ensure that everything is always tidy. So that no matter the time, no matter what happens, if you're ever inspected, you'll have a PIF that is fully compliant, detailed, available, so that you can swiftly move past any issues that might be presented with you. And although we hope it never happens, issues sometimes do arise. And this is often in the form of undesirable effects or serious undesirable effects. As part of this and part of our post-market surveillance, we do causality assessments to make sure that we understand exactly what's gone wrong, how it's gone wrong, if it's down to your product. We help you act accordingly, including reporting serious undesirable effects to the authorities within the allocated time frame. We also know that throughout the process, with all the changes, whether it's internally as a brand or with the regulation, sometimes people need support. So as part of our RP responsibilities and offering, we provide free support to you guys to make sure that if you do have any questions while the products are on the market, we're here to help and make sure that you're not blocked by having to go here, there, and everywhere, assign a quote. We're here to support you to make sure that you can be as successful as you possibly can do and focus on what you do best. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. That was amazing. And I can't, speak enough about PCR, their ability to communicate, how much they go into detail and the expertise that is on the team in order to really make sure that your product is, in fact, has all the information that it needs if there were a case where authorities would need to look at your PIF or understand the overall safety of your product. And again, EU, UK, you have one person point of contact. And I think that is really crucial to making sure you pick the right partner. We are going to open it up to questions. I see a ton of questions. I love when I see questions because that means we give a lot of information and there's more to be gained. And we will definitely be making sure we have more of these going into detail of, each part of it. It is a lot to take in. We understand that. It is a huge process. Most companies do work with authorized representatives because of the detail and the information and the expertise that is needed. So we are so happy to be offering this to everyone now with PCR, and it is just amazing partnership opportunity for everyone. Again, there is a link that will be sent out to the recording, so everyone will get this. I see a ton of questions about the recording. You will be able to listen back to us on, Thursday night if you'd like, all about EU compliance. But you will definitely get that. So let's get into the some questions that I see on the side. Okay, let's start with I love the GMP ones, right? How do I know if a facility is ISO 22716 compliant? So great question. When you're partnering with your manufacturers, right? And I say this, especially if you are a smaller brand that, might just start in outside of the EU or the UK, say the US, but you have all of the potential that you'd like to move into the EU and the UK, really important to ask that upfront, right, of your manufacturer, of their GMP compliance. In the US, Mooker is still working out the final GMP that's needed, but there is guidance for FDA and, of course, the ISO 22716 compliancy. Most facilities in the United States and actually around the world use this as their standard, right? So it's important to ask that up front. It's important to ask if they have an active certificate, right? Because like we said, every 3 years with surveillance audits. So very, very crucial to just ask that exactly how it's worded. Where is your ISO 22716 GMP certificate? And that will really help you determine if it is the right manufacturer for you, not only for selling in the EU and the UK, but the quality standards and the overall process that they have in place at the facility is the best way to protect your brand from any instances or quality issues that could happen when you're manufacturing or producing your cosmetic products. Okay, let's get into, do any of the EU countries require labels translated in their languages? So, Carl, I'll start it off, but feel free to jump in. So on the labels, there's certain information that needs to be translated into the local language, right? So for instance, the product function, any warnings, any cautions, any statements. It's always best practices to make sure that you have as much information as possible on the label in that language. But there is very little space on the label, as we know. But that is the best practice. In terms of the local language, it would be that product function and the warnings and the statements. Anything else, Carl, you think is a really important piece to have?
The only thing I'd add to that is it does differ based on the country. Unfortunately, there's no one size fits all. So you have countries like France where everything needs to be translated, and then you have other countries where there's a lot less that needs to be translated, and some of the translations can go on to slip. But that's something that we're here to help you with. And we've got a really handy breakdown of that we provide as part of our artwork review service.
Great. And again, the label is so important, as we mentioned, because that is your first, visibility when you're coming into the EU and the UK. We have a question on expiration dates. What is the difference between the shelf life and the expiration date? And do I need to also place a PAO in addition to the expiration date? So again, during the assessment is the durability of the product, right? So this would be your stability and your compatibility. The compatibility typically needed to confirm that 30 months. And there's other additional factors that go into play, such as micro, such as the viscosity of the product. But the 3-month stability that, the 3-month compatibility that you do, so product in its final componentry is what's being evaluated, right? So that final product and final component over the course of those 3 months, 12 weeks, will be evaluated, right? So if you have at the end of 12 weeks, great micro, great viscosity, everything, great pH, other factors, melting points, things of that nature, right? You can determine with other factors, right, that product will last that 30-month period. And again, it's not to try to get your product in and out faster, but it's making sure the consumer doesn't use a product that's shelf life, right, sitting on the shelf, is used past that date. The hourglass symbol would have to be put on that product as the expiration date. So different from the PAOD. And so I'm sorry if that was maybe a little bit confusing, but the expiration date is different than a shelf life date, which is different than a PAO. So I hope I cleared that up a little bit. Again, and PAOs, even even how we do them now, right? There is very much industry standards. There are cases where there's high risk products where you don't want to have a long PAO, such as like eyeliners and mascaras. We want to stay in that 6-month PAO range, and other less riskier products such as pressed powders, pressed foundations, things that don't have such a high risk of like a microcontamination or a pH change, right? Those can have those longer shelf months of 18 months, right? So it really goes by your product, its durability, and how it will eventually be used as the final consumer, right? So those are that all go into play. I see another question about GMP. I love the GMP one, so I'll always take those. For Mokra and Cosmetics GMP, is it required that finished goods be micro-tested regardless of product characteristics, water activity, or alcohol based? So micro is always a part of the finished good testing. There should be protocols put into place about the type of testing that is done for micro. You mentioned Mokra, so USP 61, 62. There's different micro testing for different types of pathogens, different agents, right? So your bacteria, yeast, mold versus your E. coli's, right? So versus your gram negative, gram positive bacteria. So there is different types of testing for micro for different types of pathogens. So understanding your product will understand the type of micro testing that has to be done on your finished good. Your water activity, even for your anhydrous products, water activity should be done at a finished good level as well. Same with alcohol-based. It's just best practices and best guidance to do so. And I say that because it has to do more or less with the contamination pieces of the finished good versus the overall preservative effectiveness of the product itself. Okay. Okay, we have a couple questions about registrar. Is the RP for the beauty brand or PCR? So PCR would be your responsible person because they are the ones based in the EU and the UK. So they would be the responsible person that goes on your label. They will be handling your PIFs, they'll be handling your CPSRs, and they will be handling your communication with local authorities. So again, taking the understanding that a registrar based in the United States, PCR based in the EU and the UK, and working together as partners, and making sure that we help you get through all of your compliance needs for cosmetics, right? So wherever you are, in the US or EU or UK, we'll be able to help. Registrar does serve as a US agent for any brands outside of the United States for Mokra. So always keep in mind that we have someone, whether it be in the US, EU, or UK, to help be that either US agent, that responsible person in the EU, UK for your brand. Again, Mokra does not require you to put anything on your label, but PCR would be on your label in the EU and the UK. I see a couple questions about about pricing. We're going to give you an email at the end of this deck, so you can reach out to John Sullivan. He is our global director of cosmetics, and he will be able to give you some pricing. It really goes by, again, understanding how many notifications you need, the type of product you have, if it falls under one base with the same shades. So it's not as easy as, here's a price, but definitely reach out after and we'll be able to provide you with some high level pricing. I see a lot of questions about labeling, and I love that because that means you guys definitely took everything I said about how important labeling is. The PCR team, labeling team is amazing. And just like Carl said, whatever your product is and knowing where it's going to go, they will be able to help guide you with the right label, right? They'll be able to make sure that you have the right information, you have the right translations. If you need additional information, especially brands, that are in the US going to EU, UK, right? Understanding the difference between a sunscreen in the US and a sunscreen in the EU, UK, even some acne products. Well, I'll not say acne, sorry, Carl, blemish products going from, the US into the EU, UK, right? Understanding that difference. Sometimes it's a shock to a lot of people that sunscreens, certain SPF products will just be a cosmetic in the EU and UK and do not require a full drug panel, right? Don't require the drug information on the label, such as the US. And it will sometimes require a different label completely. Same with anything that is an acne in the US, right? You can't say acne in EU, UK, you can say blemish, right? So understanding those differences is so important. Even something as simple as prevents breakouts, right? That's okay to say in the US if you have went through your drug stability and you've went through FDA drug. You can't say that in the EU and UK, right? So that team is going to help you figure that out and make sure that you do not say the wrong thing on your label, or if you say anything that potentially can get you in a issue when you're selling your product as a cosmetic. I love the EU and UK for that, by the way. I highly believe that sunscreen should be treated just like that around the world, because they are such a product that needs to be used. And it is difficult to have a cosmetic a sunscreen made in the US. So that is one of my favorite things of the EU and UK. One thing to note as well, the EU and UK has, with the sunscreens, the labels, right? How we just said, will be different. So the team can help you understand how those differences will affect, which in mind, right? Do you have a different label completely? What are the capabilities of your operational team managing those labels, right? So that is like the best thing I can say is the support that you'll get from the team on the labeling. We're going to answer a few more. And again, the recording will be shared with everyone after. Let's see. In order to sell a product in the UK, the responsible person must be based in the UK or in the EU. So yes, you need to have a person physically present in the UK if you want to sell in the UK. If you want to sell in the EU, you need to have a person physically present in the EU. If you want to sell in both, you need places in both. So very, very important. And that is why PCR has a physical address team in the UK and physical address team in the EU for these purposes, right? Even though it is a very similar process, a very similar, evaluation of the product, evaluation of the safety assessment, everything, there is different requirements locally, different requirements to keep up the notifications, different notification portals. So that is why you would need a responsible person for both. And of course, we're able to do that they're able to do that at PCR as well. I'll take a few more. I don't know, Carl, if you see some that you like over there. Let's see a lot of questions about artwork, a lot of questions about labeling. And again, it really needs to be evaluated by the team and they could really help you. Does a new CPSR need to be carried out if you move manufacturer, but the formulation stays the same? So if the formulation stays the same, your raw materials stay the same, and Carl, just jump in on how your team would kind of evaluate that. But if you're doing a tech transfer, you still have to notify your responsible person that you are moving the manufacturer, right? And then they will require a new quantitative formula, a new ingredient listing, basically new information, Carl, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, documentation, to make sure that the formulation is in fact exactly the same.
Yeah, to add into this, there's definitely one thing that will change within the safety assessment if you're changing facilities, and that is GMP, Jacqueline's favourite term, because you've got a new manufacturing facility, so you probably got a new GMP certificate, and that's evidenced within the safety assessment. So it might not be a full, redetailed, recomplete CPSR, but confirmation that the raw materials used are all the same grade, same kind of SDS, TDS, but definitely the GMP falls
Great.
within them.
And how did I miss that one? But yeah, so it's see how great PCR is. All the details that you need, they can answer all those questions for you on best practices, how they will approach that, right? So not a full new CPSR, but there's certain evaluations that will occur so that they can make sure they have the most up-to-date information. We are at the top of the hour, so I'm going to hand it back to Anne.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline and Carl, for such an informative webinar. And I would like to let all of our attendees know that please reach out to us if you want to learn more, have more questions. We're sincerely happy to help in this process, getting your products into the EU and UK, or checking that everything is good with our due diligence program. So we're more than happy to help, and thank you so much.